Hello and welcome to the Libertarian Perspective, a discussion of state, local, and national issues with a libertarian flair. My name is Doug Klippel. I'm the former two-time state chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida. We appreciate you tuning into today's broadcast. With me, the regional representative from the Libertarian Party of Florida for this part of the Sunshine State, Phil Wade. Phil, good to have you back again.
Great to be here. By popular demand, it's just going to be you and us. You and me.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've had a series of guests the last couple of weeks, but we're just going to kind of dive into a discussion of a broad range of issues today, so a slightly different look for the folks that are out there. So, as I always say at the start of every program, unfortunately, our friends, if you want to use the term loosely, our friends in Washington, D.C., in Tallahassee, and here in Jacksonville, all elected officials at all levels have been up to a lot of mischief since you and I last chatted. So we've got a lot of things to talk about. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Never a shortage of material, I'm afraid, here on the Libertarian Perspective. We do have an overview chart that we're going to put up that actually shows about the issues that we're going to talk about today. And I've just titled today's show a review of the issues. We're going to talk a little bit about, is there signs of dissent on the left in terms of the Obama presidency and the Obama agenda. We're obviously going to talk about something that's been a very big topical issue, the Gulf oil spill, and a review of the federal government's role in that and how they've performed. Going to jump into the Arizona immigration issue in terms of what's next and kind of our evaluation of that situation. Jaguars benefit from city council largesse. We'll talk about how the city council has handed over money to the Jaguars and whether that's a good idea. We're going to discuss whether there's a future for the Duval County Soil and Water Board, and Phil is a candidate for that board. You certainly will have some good insight on that. And then in our regularly occurring segment that we call the Government Abuse of the Month, we're going to talk about Charlie Crist and his need to have a special session with the state legislature to the tune of about $40,000 for a one-hour meeting that absolutely accomplished nothing. So that's our overview of what we got to talk about today, Phil. As I said, a lot of topics.
Absolutely.
And so without further ado, we'll go ahead to the next overhead, which actually talks about our first topic with signs of dissent on the left. And Phil, I'm going to be interested in hearing from you on this because, as some viewers of our show may remember, you actually came to the Libertarian Party from the left. And so, you know, we do have things like an overall approval rating right now of President Obama at 41%. Certainly there's a lot of surveys indicating that folks do not have confidence in his ability or his team's ability to deal with the economic issues that we have right now. Interestingly enough, in addition to the people who are disengaging because they don't have a lot of confidence in his ability to solve our economic problems and just give him a low approval rating, there's actually a lot of people from the very left-hand side of the Democratic Party who feel he's not liberal enough in his approach, and so that's also an additional sign of discontent. We certainly do have some key departures within his administration. Christina Romer, who's a special economic advisor, has announced that she's going to be departing. To a certain extent, some of that's not that uncommon because the average tenure for a person advising the president or in the president's cabinet is only about 18 months. We do have this Missouri election where some 71% of the people voted to opt out of Obamacare, specifically the mandate that people buy individual coverage. There was also a federal court ruling in Virginia around the constitutionality of requiring people to actually buy insurance. And the federal government argued that motion should be dismissed, but the federal judge in Virginia refused to dismiss that. And really all of this taken together does raise some questions about the turnout rates for Democrats and for people of a liberal persuasion for the November election. So, Phil, with all that as a backdrop, some interesting things going on in the administration, some interesting things going on in terms of people's belief and confidence in the administration. What's your take on that situation?
Well, one of the things that I think is a problem in the Obama administration is the people that he surrounds him with. Like, and I think he gets confused. When people say he's not liberal enough, maybe he listens to Rush Limbaugh and he thinks liberal means big government. So he keeps building government. When I was young, when I was in college, I actually was a Democratic voter when I was in Ohio. That's when Bill Clinton was running for office. Bill Clinton ran on issues like, let's balance the budget, let's get rid of welfare and do welfare to work. Let's have free trade with NAFTA. You know, and a lot of times liberals are anti-war, you know, so, but Obama, you know, he keeps on building government. Let's not balance the budget. Let's not have free trade. Let's have all these big social programs. And he's actually increased the war spending above what was happening under George Bush and the Republicans. So, you know, Barack Obama, if you're watching this, when we say you're not liberal enough, we mean protect our rights, get rid of the Patriot Act, you know, stop these wars which cost us money and cost people their lives.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people on the left do feel disenfranchised, and maybe they should be looking at the Libertarian Party, because I think for some of them we represent their values better than the people that are Democrats in Washington.
Mm-hmm. Phil, what about this the topic that's been discussed very frequently, and I don't have the exact statistics in my mind right now, but really by a very wide margin, the members of the Obama administration, in terms of their years of private sector experience, the average amount of private sector experience for the people in his cabinet and the people filling key roles is way below that of any other administration history. In other words, the interpretation is a lot of academics, a lot of people who've spent time on university faculty or think tanks, but have actually never had a quote-unquote real job.
That doesn't surprise me, because their attitude, look, when a politician says something, like when they start out saying, I'm not anti-government, they say that in front of legislation that, or excuse me, I'm not anti-business. They say that in front of legislation that is anti-business. Yeah. And I feel they are anti-business because they don't really understand government doesn't create anything. And a lot of these economics textbooks, they're very Keynesian in nature. A lot of our college classes on economics talk about Keynes. And that's because it's a lot simpler to teach. In the real world, it doesn't really work that way. I've taken several economics classes at the graduate level, and at the end of the day, because of globalization, I can tell you, Keynesianism doesn't actually work, because it crushes the private sector, which is the only sector that does create jobs.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, you know, I mean, you know, Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope or whatever, I always translate it and say, you know, the audacity of thinking that there's one person or set of people that are smart enough to control the free market. And I mean, and, you know, you see that everybody extolling this Paul Krugman, this Nobel Prize-winning economist or whatever, who's a special advisor to Obama and all this kind of stuff. But there is this idea that smart, learned people can actually plan something out much better than the chaos of a free market. But of course, the seeming chaos of the free market is a much more organized, much more rational way of doing things, as opposed to any government program. I mean, certainly we would know that.
There's smart people in China, Cuba, Russia. They tried to plan everything too. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, very, very well put. And you know, while we're talking about the federal government, let's go ahead to our next slide, which is talking about the Gulf oil spill. And you know, we've labeled this the federal role, and just, you know, obviously we've had a capping of the well. The final kill, the bottom kill, is still underway. Obviously a tremendous calamity in terms of, you know, up to 180 million gallons of oil estimated to have spilled. Obviously not trying to minimize the loss of life there either, and those injured in terms of this. But my question is really, Phil, you know, the questionable federal response and oversight, and then the federal government's role in payouts. You know, we have examples now with Katrina and now this, where if people are somehow expecting the federal government to come in and save them or be a great resource, you know, in times of need, they're certainly betting on the wrong horse, you know, in that regard. And you know, as libertarians, we're probably not too surprised about that, to see inefficiencies and lack of oversight and things along those lines. And this is certainly not to excuse BP. I mean, certainly some of the early reports indicate perhaps some negligence, some culpability on their part in terms of maybe not installing the right equipment, the blowout valves and blowout preventers to begin with. Certainly there's some maintenance things that I think are coming to light, and so there certainly is going to be a time to research that and hold BP liable. So we're certainly not trying to be an apologist for big business here. But the simple fact of the matter is the Department of Minerals Management is supposed to have a strong oversight role here, a lot of things slipping through the cracks with that as well. And then in terms of the actual response, it's been a bit of a comedy of errors, hasn't it?
Well, when you come down to it, BP, a part of the reason they were negligent is the government. Besides, we've already talked about the artificial cap on liability of $75 million, but really BP is well known to be in bed with the federal government at all levels. They're hardcore lobbyists, so of course they didn't expect to be liable for what they did. Now, if you have the free market and you don't have a government that's going to protect you from your mistakes, you're going to do everything you can to watch out for something like this. You're not going to cut costs because you go to dinner with Congressman so-and-so every day and you know he's got your back.